Okay, everybody, yeah, everybody can hear me. I got two mics. I'm on Fox and CNN today, aren't I? Well, I appreciate the opportunity, the invitation to be here. I'm Jason Carter, Executive Director of the Virginia Cattlemen's Association and the Virginia Beef Industry Council. We're happy to have the opportunity as well to sponsor these series of meetings through this week. The topic area is certainly right in our wheelhouse with consumption of red meat, and the theme of these meetings is particularly we appreciate too, where there's a conflict now increasingly between policy and science. It's good to have this information out there, number one. It's also good to keep this information in front of producers so that we can continue to encourage ourselves and ramp up our efforts as commodity groups to better position ourselves to share this information. I can speak firsthand with my involvement with the Cattlemen's Association, which is a policy organization, as well as a marketing group, working with legislators, and how important it is not only to understand the science, but be prepared to present the science over and over again. I was in Richmond yesterday and I testified at two House committee hearings that regarded issues of concern to us. And in one of those meetings, I heard from two different legislators that told me, we don't care about the science. The science is not what we're here for. The science is irrelevant to what our constituents want. And sometimes what they want, even if it's not what they think what they wind up needing, those lessons have to be learned. Well, you know, my granddad told me when I was growing up that knowledge is free, but education isn't always cheap. But when we ignore the science, sometimes we position ourselves for that education to cause us undue harm. I want to come to you first. I'm going to put my hat on right now as the director of the Beef Industry Council. What that means is, as part of my job, is managing the checkoff dollars in the state of Virginia. The checkoff is a program that all of you pay into that own and sell beef cattle, where $1 per head is earmarked for promotion of the beef industry and its products. 50 cents of that dollar stays in the state of Virginia. We manage that. The other half goes to the Cattlemen's Beef Board in Denver. The thing that it doesn't matter who you are, what you do or don't know about beef cattle production, everyone in this country, for the most part, that's at least 20 years old is familiar with the phrase, beef, it's what's for dinner. And that's one of the signature triumphs of the checkoff program. You can look at surveys of marketing slogans in the past, and beef, it's what's for dinner, rates typically in the top 5 of the most successful marketing slogans of all time. It's right up there with Coke is it, and Walmart and those type of places. So it's a real testament to producers' investment in the program. Part of what we do at the Beef Council, not only supporting the national group, is trying to reinvest those dollars on the state level to do similar things. One issue that we run into sometimes with support of the checkoff is that the work that's done on the state level isn't always as visible as on the national level. And I can't argue that, because on the state level, the majority of those dollars are reinvested at the retail level and also with the influencer level. Consumers, a little less apparent maybe on the producer side, because at some point it's like preaching to the choir. Virginia is a state, though, that's uniquely positioned demographically and geographically in the United States, where we have a lot of disposable income in this state, and we have a lot of access to both beef markets, in the red meat is what I'm talking about, and then also access to a lot of voodoo science. The internet has become a real resource for a lot of folks. And there's a lot of people in Virginia with disposable income that utilize that resource. And so we've invested checkoff dollars in an attempt to better educate consumers and influencers. Last year was the highest return on investment of the beef checkoff in its history. For every dollar that was invested in the checkoff, over $13 in added value resulted from that. A lot of that was in exports. The Virginia Beef Industry Council, on behalf of Virginia beef producers, invests checkoff dollars in support of the United States Meat Export Federation. That group has made tremendous strides assisting the U.S. government and its ag marketing service in creating avenues to open markets overseas. And the best part about it is they're creating markets for byproducts of cattle in the United States, offal and low-end cuts that we wouldn't necessarily eat here. I'm on the board of directors for the Meat Export Federation, and we meet twice a year, and one of the things that I always enjoy about those meetings is at the end they bring in chefs that are experienced in food preparation and a lot of these popular products from around the world. Now, I couldn't law my own children into eating liver at home right now. If they even smelled it outside of the house, they probably would object, much less coming in and sitting down in front of it. When I was growing up, calf's liver was something that we ate at my house, but by and large, Americans don't consider liver a big part of their diet anymore. However, about 2/3 of all the livers we produce in the United States from beef cattle now go to Egypt. Egypt, they must eat liver 5 times a day. So we had Egyptian chefs come in and prepare liver, and I'm here to tell you from firsthand experience, liver is liver. You can dress it up. You can dress it up, but it's kind of like putting lipstick on a pig. So if you're not really into it, it's still liver. But we're thankful that there's folks over there that love it that much. Sweetbreads, you know, the thymus gland of cattle. Something else that's probably not something on anybody's grocery list here. But in some of the South American countries, it is, and I got to partake in that. It's one of the few foods that I've ever eaten that wasn't a fruit or a vegetable that's bright yellow after it's cooked. There's something, you know, and of course most of us, if you're a parent, you kind of associate a yellow oozing sensation to infection. It's quite all right when you prepare sweetbreads down there. Heel meat, something else. I've eaten pig's feet, grew up Southside Virginia. Pickled pig's feet were a staple at most country stores I went to, and it was just a good excuse. I always thought to gnaw on bones. But in some countries, bovine feet are very popular, and knuckle meat is pretty tasty. So last year, there was about $130 in added value to every live steer attributable to offal, and about $300 added value to live steers in this country simply because of other export product value. So the checkoff is helping to support developing and maintaining those markets. We got some access to some Far Eastern countries last year. There was a meeting with Chinese officials in Denver last year in October. I'm proud to say I wasn't at, but what we contributed to it was several cases of Virginia wine. We're not in the wine growing business here, but alcohol always makes either people get along better or hate each other worse, one of the two. And in this case, it must have greased the skids a little bit, because after that meeting, they did relax some regulations to China. So Virginia had some influence. If it wasn't with our beef, it was with our wine. Building demand is a key, though, to continue to sustain the cattle markets that we're in now, and part of demand is making consumers understand what their choices are and that those choices can be healthful to them. We started last year with Beef Council dollars working with major retailers and helping educate their meat managers and their meat cutters about what labels on meat mean. You know, butchery is getting to be an art of the past in some respects, and all of you that grew up killing hogs like I did or butchering animals on the farm remember what that was like. And there is a shift, you know, in some respects to continuing to maintain those artisan traditions, but really nowhere in the state of Virginia is there a certified program in butchery or meat fabrication. So what invariably has happened at most retail outlets that we're used to shopping at, Kroger's, Food Lines, Martin's, those type of places, meat managers tend to employ people that put meat out as opposed to actually cutting and wrapping and preparing meat. So those meat managers are the resource for consumers when they make purchase decisions in some cases. So last year with Kroger, we partnered with them to create what we called a beef boot camp. And at Virginia Tech, we worked with Kroger's Mid-Atlantic region and had almost 200 of their meat managers from 7 states in the Mid-Atlantic area spend 2 days in Blacksburg. And one of the things that we focused on was production. And I worked with some folks down there, and we took them to the feedlot down at Cattlemen Farm and showed them what beef production is actually like from farm to fork, explained to them that every living organism that God put on this earth has hormones in it naturally, so hormone-free is not an accurate claim. Explain to them what castration is and what implants are meant to do. Tried to help them see and visualize in real life that cattle aren't hooked up to IVs, standing at feed troughs all day, getting fat off of chemicals and corn. These cattle are exposed to sunshine, exposed to grass typically for more than 80% of their life, even if they're not grass-finished cattle, and that animals are cared for in an environment and with an attitude in most cases better than a lot of the children that grow up in the United States. So I think it helped them understand what some of the labeling claims meant when it relates to production, and hopefully that would translate into easing consumers' minds about purchase decisions that they make based on that good old internet that they're reading. We're planning this year to do 2 of those events, partnering one with Food City, which is more popular in Southwest Virginia and Eastern Tennessee and Kentucky, and also with Food Lion. And the Food Lion program is going to take place on the campus at North Carolina State University. The Food City program that we're going to work on is going to take place at University of Tennessee. So our reach in Virginia is expanding beyond our state borders, but trying to affect people that influence our businesses here in the state. Working on engaging health professionals more. We've stepped up our efforts to sponsor both associational meetings and educational opportunities for registered dietitians. Unfortunately, I didn't get here until lunchtime. I plan to do better tomorrow in Wytheville and hear the program, but knowing the content of the program this morning, it was probably mentioned that last year the dietary guidelines have been under debate for renewal on their 5-year course, and that there's been a real push from that group to virtually eliminate red meat protein from those diets. And that's real disheartening to hear on a lot of levels, even if you're not involved in the beef business, you're just interested in good health. But one of the myths that we want to dispel and help dietitians understand is that red meat is not inherently bad at all. And so working with registered dietitians, we hope will be helpful, because the decisions that the Dietary Guideline Committee makes and those recommendations that consequently follow influence purchasing ability for school lunch programs, military programs, any subsidized programs that are social in nature that affect food decisions are influenced by those guidelines. And so when the recommendation was tossed around last year in a committee in D.C. that the serving size of red meat for school children should be 1 ounce, you're talking about a hamburger the size of a $50. I could eat 2 or 3 of those. And I eat beef quite a bit. Now, we're all genetically programmed, and I was programmed to be this size, but I can still get out of shape and sloppy. And if red meat contributes to that, then that's a lifestyle decision that people need to change. It's not necessarily all a dietary decision. So we want to help health professionals see that there is more to a healthy lifestyle than simply eliminating red meat protein. We're also trying to be more visible at consumer events like the Southern Women's Show that takes place in Richmond each year. I don't know if any of you have attended that. That's a really big event that takes place at the Richmond Speedway. The old fairgrounds is what I think of it as. Thousands and thousands of people come to it, and it's amazing the kind of questions that you get when you go to events like that. And I'm not talking about just do the boy cows have horns and the girl cows don't. I'm talking about real questions that relate red meat protein to autism in children. What type of meat should I buy so that it doesn't get stuck in my teeth? I got that question at the state fair. It's just, you can't overestimate the lack of knowledge in the consumer's mind nowadays, because they're inundated with so much information that it's almost impossible for them to absorb what's fact and what's fantasy. So on the checkoff side, I hope that I've helped you see a little bit about how we're investing those dollars in Virginia and what our strategy is in focusing on the influencers and the consumers. On the association side now, this is the policy side that I work on. That's frankly where I spend the majority of my time. We have an excellent staff on the Beef Council that does most of the work. More or less, I help them oversee the programs, give them feedback, and sign paychecks. And that's fine by me. And for the folks that attend these meetings Thursday and Friday, you'll meet my counterpart, Ann Jones. Ann and I have known each other for a long time. Great woman, very intelligent, and responsible for a lot of this good work. But on the policy side, the Virginia Cattlemen's Association, I spend a great deal of time working again, not only in the marketing, trying to help support marketing in the state of Virginia, the feeder cattle marketing through programs that not only we sponsor, but being able to tell people what their options are to help them best market their cattle. Last year was a phenomenal year marketing cattle. There's no question about it. It's always easy to spend money, but you had to work hard losing money in the beef business last year. I guarantee that there's at least one person in this room that sold calves or yearlings last year for more than you ever have in your life. And I'm sure there's more than one. I say that trying to be very fair, but how many of you ever expected to sell an 8-weight yearling steer at a value higher than those cattle were worth on the rail just 3 years ago? It's phenomenal. It really is. The margins were really good. The demand has been really good. Supply has been short. There's just nothing but a lot of positives looking ahead in the beef business from a supply and a demand standpoint. Where we, again, are positioned in this country, being so close to markets and consumers, I think is advantageous for us as a feeder cattle state. The drought situation in the Midwest helped influence some of the supply issues that we've had in this country. That's starting to come back around. There's strong indication now that female retention is up. In fact, the last survey at the end of 2014 of the beef herd indicates now that 1 out of every 5 breeding females in the beef herd in the United States is a virgin heifer. So that's a good indication that there's some positive outlook for the beef business. Last year we marketed the most cattle we've ever marketed in load lots on our Monday night field sales at our telephone sales. Added value on preconditioned calves in those sales was close to $100 a head on average. So I think that there's still value in preconditioning cattle. The buyers are still interested in that. Feedlots are running at about 2/3 to 3/4 capacity, so that's going to maintain the demand for quality cattle that don't get sick. The investment's so high that they are paying premiums for preconditioning. On the policy side of Virginia Cattlemen's Association, there's several things on the state and national level that we're looking at now and always on the watch for that affect our business. This policy and science discussion, again, those two things intersect quite a bit in the world we live in now. If it's not the environment or it's not our nutritional information that we get, it's food safety. This year in the General Assembly in Richmond, food safety is a big issue. There's a constitutional amendment that's been proposed on the House side by Delegate Morris and on the Senate side by Senator Garrett. And what that constitutional amendment would allow for is deregulation of meat and dairy products sold retail at the farm. That could mean things like raw milk. That could mean that someone sells a beef on the farm and butchers it, cuts it up, and puts it right in the car for someone. No inspection, no regulation, no standards whatsoever. I spoke yesterday morning in Richmond at 2 committee hearings about that, and I met with Senator Garrett yesterday. Senator Garrett very well may represent some of you in this room if you live between Louisa and Appomattox County down through that corridor. He's a smart man, but this is driven by a group of folks that have become very vocal over the years, and their interest has shifted increasingly away from just adding value on the local farm level to a personal liberty and rights issue. We're opposed to it. And the reasons that we're opposed to it, and I'm very clear in, is number one, we're not opposed to development of niche markets. The Virginia Cattlemen's Association has membership representing producers, processors, and consumers. We have members that finish beef on grass. We have members that finish beef on grain. We have cow-calf members. We have stocker operators. We have seed stock operators. We're not opposed to what your production method is. We want you to be in the beef business. But what we are opposed to is legislation that threatens our food safety supply by mainstreaming unregulated and uninspected food, regardless of the environment it comes from. And we're especially opposed to legislation that increases exponentially the liability on producers and consumers both for the choices that they may make. It's easy to see an added value component present itself for your farm at home. There's no question about it. The beef business in the state of Virginia is largely a part-time business. The average cow herd is somewhere between 25 and 30 cows, depending on what survey you look at. That in itself is telling that most beef cattle producers in the state of Virginia have off-farm jobs. They also probably have a second mean of income on the farm, typically. When I grew up, I came from a farm that was primarily row crop and tobacco. We had cattle as an added value component. After time, cattle became the primary component. There's talks right now about legalizing industrial hemp. That can certainly become an added value component in a lot of farm situations as well, particularly beef farms. But when you talk about added value opportunities, it's very plausible to see where deregulation of our food supply could lead someone to believe that if they own some dairy cross cows and they feel they have a market for raw milk, that it would be as simple as that. Milk the cow, sell the milk at the end of the driveway. Added value. The risk that a producer and a consumer take on, particularly if they don't understand things like E. coli 0157H7, is that not only can those type of things kill you, but that particular bacteria is transferred passively between people as well. There's a lot of people in this room, including myself, that are old enough to remember what happened with Jack in the Box restaurants in 1993. And there's a lot of people of my age and older in this room that still think about tainted meat when they think about a Jack in the Box restaurant. There's none around here that I know of, but they're not hard to find if you travel west. That tainted that organization forever. And a lot of people died as a result of consumption of tainted meat. And a lot of our food safety policies, including HACCP programs, are a result of that tragedy. What some people don't remember is about 10% of the children that died as a result of that were children that never consumed that hamburger. They were in daycare centers and schools and situations where there was care being given by folks that were exposed to it. And they passively acquired a bacteria that killed them. So, again, where the environment has always been an arena where science and policy tend to sometimes not intersect very fluidly, food safety is becoming one of those issues now. And so that's something that we're actively working against. Again, not the development of niche markets and not development of added value programs on farms, because there's good opportunity now on farms to sell off the farm with regulation. But to completely deregulate something as sensitive as meat and dairy, in our opinion, is a mistake. Next week, as part of our give back that we call it to producers at no cost, we're having a series of meetings around the state for producers, educational meetings that are focusing on two things. Number one, recognizing that a lot of you probably made more money in cattle than you ever have last year. What do you do with it? Do you reinvest it? Do you add to your liquidity? Do you pay down operating credit lines? What do you do with extra income, particularly more extra income than you're used to ever having in the beef business? And so Dr. Alex White from Virginia Tech is going to come talk about that. And then we're also recognizing how much added value that weaning is demonstrated this past year, even in a high market. We're going to have some discussions from several veterinarians relating around nutrition of cows in late trimester and calves and pre-weaning and how that affects immunoresponse to help make sure that the pounds that you're putting on those cattle are most efficient. So hope next week that y'all will consider coming to those meetings. We have, there's a few flyers back there. John Benner's holding one up now. On Tuesday, I believe, we're having one over here at the community college here at Weyers Cave in the Plecker Workforce Center. It's free. I was waiting to build up the excitement before I really tipped it by saying it's free. We're having a steak dinner. It won't cost you a thing. And if you're not a Virginia Cattlemen's Association member, we hope you'd like to become one. That night, Behringer Ingelheim is also giving away free knives to those that sign up for the first time. So we hope that as the Virginia Cattlemen's Association and the Beef Council move forward, that there's something that we can do for you simply because you're in the beef business. And if we can help, go to our website, call our office, or dig us up somehow or another. Thank you for the opportunity to sponsor these meetings and allowing me to be here and pull on your ear for about 20 minutes. Thank you again.
Any questions? Any questions for Jason? Patty's got one back there.
Yes, the question was, given that food safety policies like the one I discussed could increase producer liability, have other organizations like Farm Bureau weighed in on this? And the answer is yes. Virginia Cattlemen's Association is a part of a coalition that Virginia Farm Bureau Federation, the Virginia Academy of Pediatricians, the American Medical Association, and others are participating in trying to speak independently and collectively with everyone interested in this issue to help legislators understand that this is a liability issue as much as it's a freedom of choice issue.
Got a question here?
Yes. Who are the two delegates that don't believe in science, and where are they from?
Well, the question was, who are the two delegates that don't believe in science and where are they from? That's a big question. But in this particular instance, Delegate Rick Morris is sponsoring the amendment on the House side. Delegate Morris is from the Northern Virginia area, and Senator Garrett, who is from, I guess you would call it Central Virginia, from Mineral and Louisa down through Appomattox County. I met with Senator Garrett yesterday, and we discussed this at length. And it very much is, to them, a matter of supporting what constituents see as a personal liberty issue. And so I don't want to oversimplify it by saying or putting words in their mouth that the science isn't important. But yesterday in the House Privileges and Elections Subcommittee with constitutional amendments, there was a hearing about this issue, and I spoke in opposition to it, and hopefully more eloquently and more in a more summary fashion than what I'm doing right now. But Delegate David Ramadan from Dulles, Virginia, is chairman of that subcommittee. At the close of the hearings and testimony before the dismissal of that subcommittee, he gave a 5-minute speech about why he's in support of this amendment. Because he grew up consuming some of these products and he turned out fine. So the other thing that we need to remember, if you have discussions heading in the future about this with delegates and senators, is that because we turned out okay is not necessarily an indication that society at large that's more naive than we were growing up can handle it. The Virginia Legislative Information Services website, where the General Assembly's information resides through the session, is the resource that you need to go to find the contact information for those folks.
All right, any more questions for Jason? Let's thank Jason for taking time to come visit with us.